The Galactic Council chamber hummed with its usual dignified boredom. Floating platforms arranged in concentric circles held representatives from over 300 species, most of whom were currently engaged in a heated debate about proper trade route etiquette. Dr. Jessica Brooks stifled a yawn, wondering if her predecessors had felt equally out of place in their first year representing Earth. The chamber's crystalline walls, designed to accommodate species that communicated through light patterns, suddenly pulsed an angry red. The trade minister of the Varaxian Empire cut off mid-sentence as emergency protocols activated, transforming the serene chamber into a crisis center. "Priority distress signal," announced the automated system, its translation echoing in hundreds of languages. Origin: Xylax system. Classification: extinction level event. The chamber erupted in murmurs as data streamed across personal interfaces. Jessica's eyes widened as she processed the information. The Xylaxians, a silicon-based crystalline species she'd only read about in xenobiology briefings, were facing catastrophe. Their star had entered an unexpected phase of intense solar activity, bombarding their crystalline world with radiation levels that threatened to shatter their very molecular structure. "Impossible to mount an effective response," declared Ambassador Zixtal of the Mercurian Collective, their tentacles writhing in what Jessica had learned to recognize as distress. "The radiation levels make conventional rescue operations suicide. We must accept." "Unacceptable," interrupted Delegate Kriths of the Rigelian Assembly. "However, proper protocols for multi-species rescue operations require a minimum planning period of 3 standard months. We should convene a committee to—" Jessica stood up, her platform gliding forward. She felt hundreds of alien eyes, sensory organs, and other perception apparatus turned toward her. Earth was the newest member of the Council, barely a year into their membership. She knew what they thought of humans: aggressive, unpredictable, barely civilized. But she also knew something they didn't. "Earth can be there in 72 hours, she declared, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The chamber exploded in a cacophony of protests. The Varaxian trade minister's scales turned a brilliant shade of purple. "Impossible. The logistics alone." With respect, Jessica cut in, pulling up Earth's emergency response data. "We've been preparing for something like this since we joined the Council." The holographic display showed Earth's newly retrofitted rescue fleet. "Our ships already have experimental radiation shielding. We've run simulations for evacuation scenarios involving silicon-based life forms. We can." "You expect us to believe," rumbled Grand Arbiter Keeler, their crystalline form vibrating with skepticism, "that your primitive species just happened to prepare for this specific scenario." Jessica allowed herself a small smile. "No, Grand Arbiter. We prepared for every scenario we could think of. That's what humans do. We've spent our entire history dealing with disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. We've learned to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." She expanded the display, showing the global network of emergency response centers on Earth. "Our ships can launch within the hour. We have teams specialized in evacuation procedures, engineers who can modify equipment for crystalline lifeform transport, and medical personnel trained in xenobiology. We don't need 3 months to form a committee. We need authorization to enter Xylaxian space." The chamber fell silent. Jessica held her breath, knowing how much rode on this moment. Humanity had joined the galactic community hoping to prove they belonged. Now they had a chance to show what humans did best: face impossible odds to help others. The council leader, a being of pure energy contained within an ancient environmental suit, spoke for the first time. "Dr. Brooks, if you fail, the diplomatic repercussions will be severe, I know." Jessica straightened her shoulders. "But if we don't try, billions die. Where I come from, that's not a choice at all." The council leader's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. After what felt like an eternity, they nodded. "Permission granted. Prove us wrong about humanity, Dr. Brooks." Jessica was already activating her emergency transponder as she spoke 2 words that would change galactic history. Count on it. Colonel Michael Thunder Thompson was in the middle of his daughter's soccer game when his neural implant pinged red. Before the signal finished its first pulse, he was already sprinting toward his vehicle, sending pre-programmed apologies to his family. As his car switched to emergency override, he watched global command channels light up like a Christmas tree. "This is not a drill," his AI assistant announced, projecting mission parameters across his windshield. Operation Crystalline Shield is now active. Priority Alpha. Thunder allowed himself exactly 2 seconds of surprise. They'd run simulations for silicon-based rescue operations, but he'd never expected to use them. Status of the fleet. He barked, his vehicle merging into the emergency lane. 18 ships prepped for launch within 30 minutes. Houston, Cape Canaveral, and Kazakhstan bases report all hands on deck. Chinese and European Space Agency vessels are being retrofitted with radiation shielding as we speak. The car screeched to a halt outside Peterson Space Force Base. Thunder sprinted through security, entering the chaos of the Emergency Response Center. Dozens of screens showed global mobilization efforts, and hundreds of personnel worked with practiced precision. "Someone tell me how we're handling crystalline transport," he shouted, moving to the central command station. "Where's Dr. Martinez?" "Right here, Chief." Dr. Robert "Buck" Martinez emerged from a crowd of engineers, his trademark Lucky Wrench in hand. "Remember those experimental quantum stabilization pods we developed for the Europa mission? We're repurposing them for crystalline life-form transport. The math works. Theoretically." Thunder grimaced. "Theoretically isn't good enough, Buck." "It'll have to be." Buck pulled up schematics on the main display. "We're modifying the pods with harmonic resonators. Should prevent structural degradation during transport. It's not perfect, but it's what we've got." Thunder finished. He'd learned long ago that perfect was the enemy of good enough when lives were on the line. How many can we prep in 72 hours? If we tap every manufacturing facility on Earth, maybe enough for 10 million evacuees. Buck wiped sweat from his forehead. "We'll need more." Thunder turned to the global command screen. "Get me every 3D printing facility from here to Tokyo. I want them all producing pod components. And somebody wake up those quantum engineers in Switzerland. I need better radiation shielding yesterday." The room erupted in renewed activity. On screens around the world, missile silo doors opened, revealing not weapons but rescue ships. Civilian spacecraft were being rapidly converted in every major spaceport. Thunder watched as thousands of volunteers flooded military bases across the globe, offering their expertise, their equipment, their help. "Sir," a young lieutenant caught his attention. "CNN is asking for a statement. They live outside the base." Thunder cursed under his breath. Public relations was the last thing on his mind, but he knew the importance of keeping Earth united behind this effort. "Patch them through to screen 3. The reporter's face appeared, professional but unable to hide her excitement. "Colonel Thompson, is it true that Earth is attempting the largest rescue operation in galactic history?" Thunder squared his shoulders, knowing his words would be broadcast across the planet. "What I can tell you is this. Billions of lives are at stake. Earth has been preparing for a moment like this since we joined the galactic community. We're not just attempting a rescue. We're going to succeed." "But Colonel, some are saying it's impossible. The radiation levels alone." "Listen," Thunder interrupted, his voice firm. "Throughout human history, we've faced impossible situations. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars. Every time someone said we couldn't do something, we proved them wrong. This is no different. We're going to save those people because that's what humans do. We help." As if to punctuate his words, a massive rescue ship rose from Peterson's launch pad, its engines painting the sky with fire. Thunder watched it climb toward the stars, carrying humanity's promise of help to a species they'd never met. "Buck," he called out, turning back to the controlled chaos of the command center. I need those pods tested in 2 hours. And somebody get me a coffee. It's going to be a long night. Around the world, humanity moved as one, racing against time to save a civilization of living crystals. The impossible had become their deadline, and failure wasn't an option. Lieutenant Emma Blackwood watched the crystalline surface of Xylax grow larger in her view screen, its faceted continents refracting the angry light of their dying star. Her ship, the ESS Mercy, led the rescue fleet through a maze of solar flares that painted space in deadly crimson. Radiation levels are off the charts, her science officer reported, fingers dancing across holographic controls, shield harmonics holding at 87%. Emma nodded, her xenobiology training kicking in as she studied the world below. Begin surface scans. Look for population centers. They'll likely be underground to avoid the worst of the radiation. The Mercy shuddered as another solar flare lashed out. Through the command deck's windows, Emma could see other ships in the fleet deploying massive electromagnetic shields, creating a protective umbrella over their approach vector. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're picking up something. It's like light patterns, but organized, coming from the largest population center." Emma moved to the comm station, her heart racing. "Show me." The display filled with pulsing lights, shifting through colors and complex patterns. 7 years of xenobiology training hadn't prepared her for the beauty of it. "They're trying to communicate," she breathed. "Their whole language is based on light manipulation." Standard translation software failed spectacularly, unable to process the intricate patterns. Emma felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. If they couldn't communicate, how could they coordinate the evacuation? Then she remembered something from her studies about crystalline structures and light resonance. "Engineering," she called out. "Can you modify our external lighting arrays to match these patterns?" "Yes, ma'am. But do it, and get me control of the color spectrum." Minutes later, Emma stood before the ship's external camera controls. She took a deep breath and began programming light sequences, matching the patterns they'd received but simplifying them, reducing them to basic elements. She sent out pulses of blue light in a repeating pattern, 3 short, 1 long. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the surface below them lit up with the same pattern, followed by a new sequence. "They're responding." Emma's hands flew over the controls, building on the pattern. She created simple mathematical sequences, universal concepts that any advanced civilization would recognize. 3 pulses, pause, 6 pulses, pause, 9 pulses. The response came faster this time. The Xylaxians added their own mathematical progression, confirming their understanding. Emma felt tears in her eyes as she realized they'd just established first contact through improvised light shows. "Send the evacuation protocols," she ordered. "Basic concepts first: danger, safety, movement. Use the mathematical patterns as a foundation." Hour by hour, they built a crude but functional language of light. The Xylaxians proved to be quick learners, their natural affinity for light manipulation allowing them to grasp concepts faster than anyone had expected. Through their growing understanding, Emma learned the truth of their situation. The Xylaxians had detected the solar anomalies months ago, but their crystalline nature made faster-than-light travel impossible for them. They'd watched in helpless horror as their star began to tear itself apart, unable to escape their own world. "Lieutenant," her tactical officer interrupted. "Galactic Council observers have arrived." Emma ignored them. On her screen, a new light pattern emerged from the surface, not just communication, but an image. It showed crystalline beings, their bodies complex lattices of living crystal, gathering near massive underground chambers. They were ready. "All ships, this is Lieutenant Blackwood," she announced across the fleet channel. "Begin deployment of radiation shields around the designated evacuation zones. Medical teams, stand by for crystalline biological support. Let's show the galaxy how humanity handles a rescue mission." As her words echoed across space, The first transport pods descended toward the surface. Above them, the dying star flared again. But now a wall of human ships stood between it and a crystalline world below, their shields holding firm against the cosmic fury. Emma sent one more light pattern to the surface, the simplified version of "We're here to help" they'd developed. The response came back immediately, a cascade of colors that her translator rendered as a single word: hope. Major James Daredevil Davidson had earned his call sign flying rescue missions through Category 6 hurricanes back on Earth. But as he guided his reinforced shuttle through a sea of plasma storms, he realized Earth's worst weather had nothing on an angry star. "Status report," he barked, wrestling with the controls as another shockwave hit. "Shields at 63% and dropping," his systems officer replied. "That last flare took out 2 of our sensor arrays. The good news: our new flight path is working. We're drawing fire away from the evacuation zones." James grinned despite the situation. Trust humans to turn their ships into cosmic lightning rods. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see other shuttles performing the same dangerous dance, creating a web of electromagnetic deflection that protected the transport operations below. His comm crackled to life with an urgent message from Xylax, the Xylaxian elder he'd been working with. The translation came through in pulses of light that his neural implant converted to speech. "Major Davidson, the underground city in Sector 7 is experiencing structural failures. The crystal lattices are becoming unstable under the radiation stress." James pulled up the sector map, his augmented reality display highlighting the danger zones in angry red. "How many people down there?" 300,000, Xylax's light voice responded. "Our traditional evacuation routes are compromised." James studied the map, his mind racing. The traditional alien approach would be to write off Sector 7 as too dangerous. But he wasn't alien. "Listen up," he broadcast to his squadron. "We're implementing Operation Underground Railroad. Remember those crazy mining shaft extractions we practiced? Time to do it for real." His pilots responded with immediate acknowledgement. They'd drilled these scenarios dozens of times, even though everyone said they were impossible. Human impossible, as it turned out, was very different from alien impossible. "Xylax," James called out, "I need your people to synchronize their crystalline resonance. Remember those frequencies we discussed, the ones that strengthen your molecular bonds." "Yes, but..." The elder's light pattern showed confusion. "That would require coordinated effort from thousands." "Trust me," James replied, already adjusting his shuttle's deflector array. "Humans have some experience getting people to work together in a crisis." What followed was unlike anything the observing Galactic Council members had ever seen. Dozens of human shuttles descended into the weakening crystal caverns, their modified shields projecting carefully calibrated frequencies. Below, the Xylaxians began to sing with light, their bodies pulsing in harmony, strengthening the very crystal their cities were built from. "Now," James ordered as his sensors showed peak resonance. The shuttles activated their emergency transport systems, specially modified for crystalline life forms. They began evacuating the Xylaxians in waves, using the harmonic resonance to prevent structural degradation during transport. A massive solar flare chose that moment to strike. James watched in horror as the radiation sensors spiked into red zones never before recorded. "Major," his systems officer warned, "shield failure imminent." James made a split-second decision. "Divert all power from life support to the shields," he ordered. "We can hold our breath." His crew didn't hesitate. As their oxygen supply cut off, the shields flared brighter, holding back the deadly radiation for precious extra minutes. Those minutes meant thousands more Xylaxians reached safety. When the last transport cleared the underground city, James's vision was starting to blur from lack of oxygen. "Get us out of here," he wheezed, restoring life support as his shuttle climbed for orbit. In space above, the Galactic Council observers watched in stunned silence. One of them finally spoke, their translator struggling to convey their awe. They risked death by suffocation to save strangers. Crick's response came in a brilliant burst of light. They call it Tuesday. As his shuttle docked with the main evacuation ship, James was already planning the next rescue. His neural implant pinged with updated numbers. Millions saved, millions more to go. The star above them churned with increasing fury, but humanity's shields held firm. A wall of determined technology between destruction and salvation. Status report on Sector 8. He called out, not even taking time to catch his breath. There would be time for rest later. Right now, there were people who needed help. Kyle MacGyver Anderson had a reputation for fixing the unfixable. As he stared at the collapsed crystal archway blocking access to thousands of trapped Xylaxians, he faced his greatest challenge yet. Conventional cutting methods will shatter the entire structure, reported his Xylaxian counterpart, a crystalline scientist named Xylax, her body pulsing with worry purple light. The resonant frequencies are too unstable. Kyle ran his hand through his disheveled hair, studying the readings from his modified scanner. The evacuation center beyond the collapse held over 10,000 Xylaxians, and the radiation levels were rising by the minute. "Show me those ice mining lasers again," he said, pulling up the schematics on his holo display. Around him, his engineering team worked frantically in the makeshift command center they'd established in a reinforced crystal cavern. The lasers, Xylax's light patterns shifted to confusion blue. They're designed for frozen methane deposits, not living crystal. Exactly. Kyle's fingers flew across the display. Ice has a crystalline structure too. If we modify the frequency to match your people's molecular resonance. He paused, an idea forming. Xylax, your people communicate through light, right? And your bodies naturally process and channel it. Yes, but what if we turned the laser into a conversation? Kyle was already pulling equipment apart, his augmented reality display highlighting connection points. Instead of cutting through, we get your people to respond to it. Like a do-it. Understanding flickered through Xylax's crystalline form. A harmonious resonance, amplified by our natural abilities. They worked with desperate speed, combining human technology with Xylaxian biological knowledge. Kyle's team modified 3 ice mining lasers, while Xylax communicated with the trapped civilians, teaching them the precise light frequencies they would need to generate. "Ready?" Kyle asked, positioning the first laser. Sweat dripped down his face, despite his suit's cooling systems. "Ready," Xylax confirmed. "My people understand their role." Kyle activated the laser. Instead of the brutal cutting beam it was designed for, it emitted a precise pattern of light frequencies. Through the crystal walls, they could see the trapped Xylaxians beginning to pulse in response, their bodies synchronizing with the beam. "It's working," someone shouted. The collapsed crystal was starting to vibrate, but not chaotically. The combined resonance of the laser and the Xylaxians was causing it to shift, to flow like liquid glass. "More power," Kyle ordered. "Match their frequency exactly." The crystal barrier began to sing, a haunting melody of light and vibration. Then, with a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane, it transformed. Where there had been a solid wall of crystal, now there was an arch, its structure actually stronger than before. "Sweet mother of science," Kyle breathed as Xylaxians began streaming through the newly formed passage. "We didn't just clear the collapse. We rebuilt it." Xylax's form blazed with excitement. "The combination of your technology and our biological properties, it's unprecedented. This could revolutionize our entire approach to crystal engineering." The Galactic Council observers, watching from a safe distance, frantically recorded every detail. One of them spoke up, their translator struggling to convey their disbelief. They invented an entirely new field of science during a rescue operation. Human deadline pressure, Kyle grinned, already moving to the next blocked passage. Does wonders for innovation. Word of their success spread quickly through the evacuation zones. Soon, other human Xylaxian teams were replicating their technique across the planet, clearing collapsed passages and even strengthening existing structures against the increasing radiation. Kyle's neural implant pinged with an incoming transmission from Colonel Thompson. "Anderson, the Council's saying what you just did is technically impossible. Want me to stop?" Kyle asked, prepping another laser array. "Hell no," Thompson replied. "Keep doing the impossible. Just try to document it this time. The physics people are having fits." As Kyle worked on the next barrier, he noticed Zirane's light patterns shifted to a new color he hadn't seen before. "What does that color mean?" he asked. "Hope," she replied. "And something else we haven't had a word for until now. Humanity." Commander Ashley Phoenix Parker stood on the bridge of the ESS Defiant, watching as the star before them twisted itself into impossible shapes. The sensor readings were off the scale. A massive solar flare, larger than anything they'd seen, was building. "Time to impact," she demanded, scanning the holographic displays surrounding her command station. 4 minutes, her science officer replied grimly. "This one's different, Commander. Energy readings suggest it could strip the planet's atmosphere." Ashley's neural implant buzzed with urgent updates. Below them, the largest evacuation center on Xylax housed over 2 million civilians. The transport ships weren't due for another 15 minutes. Status of our shields. Already at 89% capacity from the previous flares. Engineering says they won't hold against this one. Not even close. Ashley closed her eyes for a moment, seeing her daughter's face. The birthday message she recorded before leaving Earth was scheduled to play tomorrow. "How many ships do we have in range?" 3 destroyers and 5 frigates, but their shields are in worse shape than ours. The Galactic Council observation vessel, hanging back at a safe distance, transmitted an urgent message. "Commander Parker, our analysis indicates survival is impossible at your current position. The logical course." Ashley cut the transmission. "Get me fleet-wide," she ordered, her voice steady. "Channel open. All ships, this is Commander Parker. You've seen the readings. You know what's coming. I'm giving you a direct order to withdraw to minimum safe distance." Her bridge crew stared at her as the other ships acknowledged and began pulling back. They knew what she wasn't saying. "Engineering," she called out, "redirect all power to the forward shields. Everything we've got. Life support, weapons, propulsion, all of it." "Ma'am," her XO stepped forward. "That's suicide." "No, Lieutenant." Ashley smiled. "That's duty." She opened a channel to the evacuation center below. "This is Commander Parker to Xylax Control. Keep loading those transports. We'll buy you the time." The response came in pulses of desperate light. "Your ship cannot survive." "Probably not," Ashley agreed. "But 2 million of your people will. That's a trade I can live with, or die with, as the case may be." Impact in 60 seconds. Ashley watched the massive solar flare building, a wall of plasma that would dwarf planets. "It's been an honor," she told her crew. Not one of them moved to leave their posts. 30 seconds. The flare released, racing toward them with apocalyptic fury. Ashley thought of her daughter again, hoping she'd understand someday. Shields at maximum. The flare hit. The Defiant shuddered as if God himself had struck it with a hammer. Warning sirens screamed as systems overloaded. On the bridge, temperature sensors spiked as the cooling systems failed. "Shields failing," someone shouted over the chaos. Then, impossibly, new contacts appeared on their sensors. 3 alien vessels, a Rigelian battlecruiser, a Varaxian destroyer, and a Mercurian carrier, dropped out of hyperspace directly alongside them. "This is Delegate Kriths," came the transmission from the Rigelian ship. "We observed. We learned. We choose to stand with humanity." The alien ships locked their shields with the Defiance, creating an overlapping barrier 4 times stronger than any single ship could generate. The combined shield matrix glowed like a newborn star as it held back the solar fury. 10 degrees port. Ashley ordered, finding new strength. Form up on our flanks. We hold this line together. For 5 eternal minutes, 4 ships from 4 different species stood against nature itself. When the flare finally passed, their shields were dead, their hulls were scorched. But below them, the evacuation center stood untouched. The transport ships arrived to find 2 million Xylaxians alive and waiting, saved by an act of combined sacrifice that would be legendary in 4 different cultures. The Galactic Council observation vessel transmitted again, this time with a very different message. Commander Parker, we withdraw our previous assessment of humanity's capabilities. And thank you for teaching us courage. Ashley slumped in her chair, exhausted but smiling. XO, get me a damage report. And see if our new friends need any help with repairs. Something tells me this isn't the last time we'll be fighting side by side. Captain Tyler Quicksilver Reynolds had earned his nickname coordinating emergency evacuations during the Great Pacific Tsunami. But as he stood in the Fleet Coordination Center aboard the ESS Horizon, watching hundreds of transport signatures fill his tactical display, he knew this would eclipse everything that came before. Sir, his traffic control officer called out, we've got another wave of transports emerging from the atmosphere. Traditional spacing protocols aren't going to work. There are too many. Tyler studied the holographic display, watching as the ships carrying precious crystalline cargo emerged from Xylax's atmosphere like a swarm of metallic fireflies. The traditional hyperspace lanes could handle maybe 100 ships at a time. They had thousands. Who says we need to follow traditional protocols? Tyler's fingers danced across his console, remapping flight paths. Remember that crazy formation flying we did during the Mars dust storm evacuation? His XO's eyes widened. The parallel lane strategy. But sir, that's never been attempted with hyperspace jumps. The energy interference alone would normally tear the ships apart, Tyler finished. But we're not dealing with normal ships anymore. He opened a channel to the fleet. All vessels, this is Captain Reynolds. Upload formation pattern Delta 7. We're going to treat hyperspace like a highway. Multiple lanes, multiple levels. The Galactic Council observers, who had been quietly documenting everything since Commander Parker's stand against the solar flare, suddenly erupted in protest. Captain, the mathematical models clearly show. Math is great, Tyler cut in. But right now we need magic. And humans are pretty good at that too. He turned to his crew. Begin formation alignment. Let's show them how Earth handles traffic jams. What followed would be studied in space navigation academies for centuries to come. The human fleet arranged itself in a 3-dimensional grid, creating parallel lanes in space. Each lane would generate its own hyperspace corridor, something previously thought impossible due to energy interference. First wave, engage, Tyler ordered. The ships jumped in perfect synchronization. Their combined wake created a stable hyperspace matrix, allowing the next wave to follow almost immediately. Where traditional methods would have taken weeks, they were evacuating millions per hour. Sir, his sensor officer shouted. The star, it's going critical. Tyler watched as the dying star began its final death throes. They'd known this was coming, but not this soon. They still had millions of Xylaxians to evacuate. Time to get creative, he muttered. All ships, increase power to inertial dampeners. We're about to attempt something really stupid. He ordered the fleet to tighten their formation further, practically stacking the ships on top of each other. The energy bleed from so many ships in close proximity created a strange effect. A cascade of hyperspace windows, merging and splitting like soap bubbles. Physics department is going to love this, someone muttered. Physics can write papers later, Tyler responded. Right now, we use it. All ships, prepare for synchronized jump on my mark. In orbit around Xylax, the remaining evacuation ships formed up. The sight was unprecedented. Hundreds of vessels, human and alien alike, arranged in a three-dimensional dance of desperate precision. Now, the jump was unlike anything ever attempted. The combined hyperspace windows created a massive corridor, large enough for multiple ships to travel side by side. The fleet moved as one, a river of ships carrying precious cargo to safety. In the asteroid belt of Earth's solar system, prepared habitation zones lit up as the first waves of refugees arrived. The sight of crystal cities beginning to form among the asteroids would become one of the most iconic images of the century. Back at Xylax, Tyler coordinated the final evacuations. His neural implant was streaming data about the star's deterioration, counting down the minutes they had left. Last transport clearing atmosphere, his traffic officer reported. Wait, I'm picking up one more signal. It's the Galactic Council observation vessel. The alien ship's transmission was brief. Captain Reynolds, we request permission to join your formation. We find ourselves wanting to learn more about human methods. Tyler smiled. Welcome aboard, friends. Let's go home. As the final ships jumped to safety, the star behind them began its death throes in earnest. But its light show, spectacular as it was, illuminated empty cities. Their inhabitants were safe, carried to a new home by the species everyone had underestimated. Admiral Sarah Stormbreak Cooper stood before the Galactic Council 1 year later, but everything had changed. The chamber that had once dismissed Earth as a primitive newcomer now hummed with anticipation of her words. Through the crystalline walls, she could see the glittering shapes of the new Xylaxian cities orbiting Earth, their structures catching sunlight and transforming it into displays of breathtaking beauty. The integration of Xylaxian refugees has been more successful than we could have hoped, Sarah began, her voice carrying across the chamber. Their crystal engineering techniques, combined with human innovation, have revolutionized our solar system's infrastructure. But more importantly, they've revolutionized how we see ourselves in the galaxy. She gestured to the holographic display showing the asteroid belt, now transformed into a glittering chain of crystalline habitats. 1 year ago, we were the new kids in the galaxy. Today, we're demonstrating that differences between species aren't barriers. They're opportunities. Crix, now serving as the Xylaxian representative to the Council, pulsed with agreement gold. The humans didn't just save our people, their light voice translated. They taught us to see possibilities where we saw only problems. When their ships formed that impossible hyperspace matrix during the evacuation, they weren't just breaking the laws of physics, they were breaking the laws of limitation we had placed on ourselves. The Council leader's energy form shifted thoughtfully. Indeed, the emergency protocols developed during the Xylax rescue have been adopted by 17 member species. The human concept of disaster preparation has become standard doctrine. Sarah smiled, remembering the frantic preparations that had seemed so impossible a year ago. We've learned as much as we've taught. That Xylaxian crystalline technology has transformed our communication systems. Their cities in our asteroid belt have become a symbol of what's possible when species work together. She pulled up another display, showing the mixed crews now serving on Earth's rescue fleet. Human ships now carried crystalline communication arrays, while Xylaxian structures incorporated human-designed electromagnetic shielding. The innovation born of crisis had evolved into a true synthesis of cultures. A young Xylaxian approached the chamber center, their crystal forms still showing traces of the radiation damage they'd survived. Admiral Cooper, they pulsed hesitantly. My clutchmates and I have studied Earth's history since we settled here. We still don't fully understand. Your species had no obligation to help us. You risked everything for strangers. Why? Sarah thought of Commander Parker's scorched ship, of Major Davidson's desperate shuttle runs, of Kyle Anderson's midnight engineering miracles, of all the humans who had put their lives on the line without a second thought. Because that's what neighbors do, she replied simply. On Earth, when we hear a cry for help, we answer. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. It's not about obligation, it's about who we are. The chamber filled with the multi-spectrum glow of Xylaxian approval, their light language expressing what words couldn't. Among the council members, Sarah noted the Regelian, Varaxian, and Mercurian representatives, the species whose ships had joined Commander Parker's last stand. They had changed too, inspired by humanity's example. The galaxy is vast and often dangerous, Sarah concluded. But it's not nearly as vast or as dangerous when we face it together. Earth didn't just promise to help that day. We promised to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And that's a promise we intend to keep. As she finished speaking, a new light pattern swept through the chamber. A combination of Xylaxian crystal speech and human Morse code, creating something entirely new. It was picked up by ships and stations across known space, a message in 2 languages that meant the same thing. Hope has a new name. It's called humanity. In Earth's asteroid belt, the crystal cities caught the light of the sun and sent it dancing across space in patterns of gold and blue. They stood as monuments not just to survival, but to the moment when humanity proved that in the darkest hour, the brightest light comes from helping others. And somewhere in the vast archive of the Galactic Council, a simple entry marked the day everything changed. When Xylax called for help, Earth answered, and the galaxy remembered.